EASIT, Easy Access for Social Inclusion Training.
This is Unit 1, Media Accessibility, Element 4, What is Media Accessibility? Video lecture, What is Media Accessibility? I am Anna Matamala from Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona. In this lecture, I will be talking about the notion of media accessibility and how it relates to other concepts such as audiovisual translation or accessibility. Media accessibility was born in the field of audiovisual translation, AVT for short. AVT is a branch of translation studies that deals with the transfer of audiovisual text. At the beginning, terminology was quite unsettled, and in the literature you will find terms such as constrained translation, film translation, screen translation, media translation, multimedia translation, etc. In the end, audiovisual translation gained ground and is now used to refer to different translation modes in the audiovisual world. At the beginning, AVT put the emphasis on transfer modes such as dubbing, subtitling, voiceover, or interpreting in traditional media such as cinema or television. At the turn of the century, some scholars started to show an interest in other modes, which are more related to accessibility. For instance, audio description, AD for short, or subtitling for the deaf and hard of hearing, SDH for short. The conference in so many words, held in London in 2004, and the first Media for All conference in Barcelona in 2005 were a landmark. AD and SDH were definitely included in the AVT agenda. Media accessibility at the beginning referred mainly to AD and SDH, but it then expanded to include sign language interpreting or audio subtitling. One may wonder how same language SDH or how audio description can be seen as translation. Well, the typical reply is to refer to Jacobson's seminal work, where he differentiates between intralingual, interlingual, and intersemiotic categories of translation. SDH can be an example of intralingual translation, in which translation takes place into other signs of the same language. Dubbing would be an example of interlingual translation, in which translation takes place into another language. Audio description could be seen as an intersemiotic translation. Although Jacobson considers intersemiotic translation a transfer from verbal signs into non-verbal sign systems, we could expand this definition and include exactly the opposite. That is, the translation of non-verbal signs into words, which is what audio description is all about. In 2005, issue number 4 of the journal Translating Today included a paper where Jorge Díaz-Cintas took a different approach and advocated for the concept of accessibility as a unifying term, a concept that Pilar Orero and I embraced in a 2007 article. We put forward that in order to produce an accessible opera, you need to overcome both sensorial and linguistic barriers. With this approach, media accessibility is not only for persons with disabilities, but also for people who may not understand a language. In the words of Gian Maria Greco, media accessibility would concern media products, services, and environments for all persons who cannot or cannot completely access them in their original form. If we have a look at MAP, the Media Accessibility Platform, you will see that this broad concept guided its creation. MAP adopts a holistic approach and considers a wide range of access services or modalities: dubbing, voiceover, subtitling in different forms, live subtitling, risk speaking, SDH, surtitling, etc., audio description, audio subtitling, media interpreting, including sign language interpreting. Similarly, when Pablo Romero Fresco proposes his concept of accessible filmmaking, he thinks about integrating both traditional audiovisual translation modes and access services as part of a film production process, rather than as a post-production task. These approaches, in which media accessibility is part of AVT or equals AVT, are what Gian Maria Greco calls particularist accounts. However, some scholars consider that media accessibility is wider than AVT and cannot be reduced to a sub-area of translation studies. This third approach, a universalist account in Greco's terminology, considers that media accessibility is a broad interdisciplinary area that overlaps with many fields, including AVT. Media accessibility is seen as a proper subdomain of a new field called accessibility studies. There's still a lot of room for further development of these concepts from a theoretical point of view. In the book I published in 2019, I took a very simple approach. First, I consider that the same phenomenon can be approached from different perspectives. Secondly, I think that media accessibility may not be the most adequate term. Using the simple word media may imply that all the media beyond the audiovisual world are including, and at the same time may leave out relevant audiovisual content such as scenic arts performances. This is why I prefer to establish a parallel with audiovisual translation and talk about audiovisual accessibility. Audiovisual translation would be part of translation studies, and audiovisual accessibility would be part of accessibility studies. Any of the access services or audiovisual transfer modes I have mentioned before could be analyzed from both perspectives. Another interesting concept is that of accessible communication or barrier-free communication, an approach often taken by German-speaking scholars. The focus is put not just on audiovisual content or on media, but on communication as a whole, which needs to be barrier-free or accessible for all. The emphasis is put not just on persons with disabilities, but on everybody. This approach considers not only traditional transfer modes, but also new media accessibility services, easy language, and related concepts. This video lecture has been prepared by Anna Matamala from Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona. You can reach me at anna.matamala@uab.cat.
Picture source: Greco, Gian Maria, 2019. Accessibility Studies, Abuses, Misuses and the Method of Poetic Design. In C. Stefanidis, Editor, HCI International 2019, Lecture Notes in Computer Science, Volume 11786. Sham, Springer, pages 15 to 27.
The project EASIT has received funding from the European Commission under the Erasmus Plus Strategic Partnerships for Higher Education Programme, Grant Agreement 2018-1 ES01 KA203 05275. The European Commission's support for the production of this publication does not constitute an endorsement of the contents, which reflect the views only of the authors, and the Commission cannot be held responsible for any use which may be made of the information contained therein. This work is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Share Alike 4.0 International License. Partners of the EASIT project: Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona, Università degli Studi di Trieste, Universidade de Vigo, Stiftung Universität Hildesheim, SDI München, Dyslexie Verbundet, Radio Televizija Slovenija, Zavod RISA. EASIT, Easy Access for Social Inclusion Training.